Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and I'm here for the best and the worst of the books that I read in 2017. So I am looking at my camera right now. We finally got a charger for my Nikon. My Nikon does not have a little screen that comes out, so my daughter was sitting behind it trying to make sure that I was in focus and centered and all that kind of stuff. Hopefully this will work as a median until I get my other camera that I'm replacing my old one with. Luckily we had insurance on it and they're paying for most of it. So we're only coming out of pocket a little bit for the new camera. But it's not here yet. And I think that's because we haven't ordered it yet. We're working on it. The price got jacked up really high. We're waiting for it to come back down. Fun stuff. So this is a temporary solution and I hope this is better than my phone. This is not better than my phone. We will go back to my phone until the camera does get here. So I picked out my 5 best and my 5 worst. Everybody gives the little spiel about how this is not an attack on any person, writer, or anything. I think that goes without saying, so I'm not going to rehash the big disclaimer like everybody else does. And just know that I would love to have a conversation with you guys in the comments about any of these books. So I figured we'd start with the worst and then move to the best. And they're in no particular order, except that my best will be number 1 and my worst will be number 1. Because those are my best and my worst. Yeah. Okay, so I only have 2 physical books from each pile because everything else either on my Kindle or I checked out from the library. So I don't have most of these books. And if I had the forethought to go try to find them in my library, it might have been a beneficial thing, but my library here really sucks. And so the most recent book that I've found in there was like 3 years old. It's a military library. They just don't have very much. So yeah. Number 5 on my worst list is Airy. And the reason this is number 5 is because the first book, Magonia, was so wonderful. I loved it. And this one, it just fell flat for me. I didn't like the way it ended. I felt like it was almost unneeded. And I feel like if she had made the first book a little bit longer, you could have had 1 book instead of 2. I mean, I'm glad it ended the way it did. It seemed to take forever to get there. And it just was not one of my favorites. And that's sad because I loved Magonia. This one was just not as good. Okay. So I inadvertently lied to you guys. I actually have 3 of the worst books with me. The next book on my list was Return to the Isle of the Lost. And I love the premise of this. I thought the movie was super cute. This is a prequel to the movie that Disney had out a while back. And I was really looking forward to reading it. Wait, wrong one. This is the right one. I'm looking at it going, wait a minute, this is the Return. That's not the one I read. I read this one. So this one is the prequel to the Disney movie. So it goes book, Disney movie, book, Disney TV show, or Disney movie or something, and there's another book. I don't know. It was too confusing. And this took forever. I was not invested in it. I was bored with it, and I'm thinking about getting rid of it. So this was definitely one of those books that it wasn't terrible, but I definitely did not enjoy it either. So yeah. The next book that was my number 3 pick, I guess. So yeah, 5, 4, 3. Number 3. I'm good at this. My number 3 pick was We Were Liars. And We Were Liars bothered me so much. It wasn't a bad book. It wasn't poorly written. It was meant to be the way it was. I just didn't like it. You spend, for a 220-page book, you spend the first 200 pages having no clue what's going on. You spend the last 20 pages finding out everything you didn't know about the first 200 pages. And I just found myself very annoyed that I did not understand anything that was going on in the first 200 pages. And then I got pissed off because for the last 20 pages, they tell you everything that they didn't tell you beforehand. And it bothered me. It was one of those books that nobody tells you about because if they told you what happened, it would totally give away the plot of the book. So basically it's about this wealthy family that owns an island that spends every summer there, and something goes wrong. But you don't know what goes wrong. You don't know if you can trust the people in the book. You don't know if you can even trust the narrator. It's just, it was too much for me. It was too much confusion, too much, what? Scratching your head and going, oh. And then of course the whole thing comes out and it breaks me to tears, and it just, the whole book pissed me off because of it. And yes, I am easy to cry. Yes, I am easy to laugh. So having me cry in a book does not necessarily mean that I really enjoyed the book. It just means that I put some sort of faith into this book. I'm terrible. I cry at commercials, so that has absolutely no caliber to how much I like the book or not. But yeah, it just, ugh. My number 2 book is Girl on a Train. I didn't make it very far. I thought I made it farther than I did. I was bored out of my mind, so I DNF'd it. Part of me wants to go back and read it just so I know how the book ends. The other part of me watched the movie so I could figure out how it ends. So I know how the book ends now, and at least the basic premise. I'm sure that getting there is completely different, but I'm sure that the end result is probably still the same. I don't think they've changed the book so much, but then again, they did change My Sister's Keeper a lot, so I don't know. So I'm tempted to finish it, but I was so bored doing nothing but reading about this drunk on a train. You guys will have to tell me, should I finish this, or is it just get rid of it? That's fine, whatever. And then my number 1. When I first started doing books on my planner channel and making it kind of a all-encompassing channel, we changed the name of it, we changed the premise behind it, and I brought books into it. One of the first things I did was get really excited and go to those websites to try to get some books to see what else was out there. And I ended up finding this one website that you get a book and you review it, and about 6 months later they'll tell you yes or no that your review was published. If your review is published, you get points, which gets you better books, yada yada yada. I tried it out. There was like 10 books available to me to look at, and one of them sounded interesting. It was obviously self-published. It was obviously very, very badly edited. The premise behind it sounded so interesting, and I was really looking forward to it. The book was called Something, and it was about this girl who, I'm trying to remember. I read this months ago. I probably read it 8-9 months ago, and I remember this book having a ton of vulgarity in it, characters that did not matter, a premise that was floppy at best. All you know is that there's like some sort of demon coming after her, and if you want to know, I will try to figure out which video has my actual review on it. There's a review on Goodreads for it, so go to my Goodreads and there's a whole written review on it. But the book was horrible. It had the worst editing I've ever seen, and I'm one of those people that if a name is spelt wrong, like there's a big joke going around one of the groups that I'm part of on Facebook, how Percy's name is spelt wrong on one of the Harry Potter books. I just finished reading Truth Witch, and one of the main characters' names is spelt wrong on one of the books. I never caught it. I never saw it, and I just read it. And I'm just going through the Harry Potter books again, did not catch it. So I don't notice a lot of the small mistakes. These mistakes were so big that they were distracting. I had to go back and reread sentences because they were written so badly. It was a horrible book. If the editing was just the only problem, I would not have given it a 1. It was the fact that there was unneeded characters, the plot went too long. It was the first in a series, and I think she could have done such wonderful things with this book. But it was essentially about a book that was cursed. You read the book, you get cursed. The people around you are affected by this book. It's a demon possession type of thing. It doesn't make any sense in my head right now, but when I read it, it made sense at the time. And I remember thinking the premise was wonderful. The reality was not at all. So Something was by far and away the worst book I read this year. I am not an overly critical reader, and so it has to really bore me or really bother me for it to make a lower list. And these books more or less just really bored me, except for something which really bothered me. And so I think that I have a tendency to like a lot of books. So narrowing down my top 5 books was a whole other issue, because there were so many books that I really enjoyed. I read 71 books, so I only was picking 10, 5 best, 5 worst, and I thought that'd be an easy job. The 5 worst was actually pretty hard to find 5 that I didn't like. So this is the books you get. 2 of them I knew for sure. The other 3 I had to look through my list and figure out which ones were the worst ones I read. We Were Liars stuck out because I was so angry when I was reading it. But my best list, it was really hard to pick out 5 that I thought were the best books that I read this year. So my top 5, I'm gonna kind of try to do this the same way. Number 1 is gonna be my favorite. Everything else just kind of ish where I put it. So number 5 would be A Monster Calls. A Monster Calls is this book about a little boy who has nightmares and whose mom is dying of cancer, and this monster, who's a tree outside his house, comes to help. And this book was not the best book I've ever read in my entire life, but it got to me. It like hit a certain nerve in me that just kind of twanged with my heart, and it stuck there. So when I thought of my 5 best books, this one automatically hit that nerve, saying, okay, this may not be the best book I've ever read, but it really hit that heart note for me that made it such a good book, in my opinion. I totally identified with the mom. I kept thinking about how I would feel if I was dying of cancer. I wouldn't want to leave my little boys behind. I have a son who's about the same age as the character in the book. And so it kind of just, I think it hit all those little notes for me. It hit the notes of mom, of me and my kids, of what would happen to my kids. The monster was this wonderful addition to the story, and it was so beautiful. And on top of it all, the illustrations are gorgeous. But again, it was a library book. I checked it out from a library that's on the other side of the island, and they're really hard to come by, and their hours are terrible. So I won't have it for you, but it is just a beautiful book. And so hopefully the cover will inspire you to read it. So my number 4 pick is A Love That Splits the World by Emily Henry. And A Love That Splits the World was this absolutely beautiful story. It's about a girl who was adopted, and she has visions at night while she's supposed to be sleeping of this grandmother figure that comes and visits her in her room. She has no idea who this person is, but she trusts her. She has all these amazing stories about her heritage, because she is Native American, and there's all of these stories that span not only just Native American, but all different types of walks of life. And she really relies on this grandmother figure until one day she disappears. The book picks up. She's talking about how grandmother hasn't visited her like 5 years or something. I can't remember the exact time frame because it's been a while, but how she really misses her, and she's changed her life completely. She went from being a cheerleader to all of a sudden falling for this guy who she's never seen before, who seems to go to her school, but she's never seen that school before, it's a really weird little situation that they have going here. And I don't really know how to explain the book without giving vital pieces of it away, but she spends the book with this boy and trying to find her grandmother. And it's beautiful, it's very lyrical, it's very heartwarming. It was just a beautiful book, and I really suck at this, I'm sorry guys. So my 3rd favorite book this year is Station 11. Station 11 is a book that I just read, so this one's more fresh in my head. It's a post-apocalyptic type of dystopian book. A flu went through the world and decimated 99% of the people. And this book is told in numerous points of view. The main point of view is 20 years after the flu has rampaged the country, the world. You have this theater troupe that travels through southern Canada and Northern America, and does Shakespeare and classical music. They have a bunch of just artists with them. And then it comes back to when the flu started, and then it comes back to 20 years before the flu started, and it kind of gives you different points of view. So you have an actor named Arthur who dies in the first chapter of the book, but you go back and you see his life 20 years or 15, 20 years prior to the flu. And then you see Kirsten 20 years after the flu as a grown adult who is trying to navigate this new world. And you're seeing things like how they talk about airplanes and how did this happen? How did people fly? You mean to tell me you walk into a room and you flick a switch and the lights would come on? That's amazing. They were talking about, you know, what life was like before versus after. And you see a little bit of the during, you see a little bit of the right after, right before. You know, the book starts with a play, and in the play, Arthur, one of the main characters, dies of a heart attack. And that's the day that the flu is brought to Toronto. And then you see all these different characters. You have like 5 or 6 different characters that all play major roles. It sounds really confusing. It's hard to tell you more without giving anything away, because you see how all these characters intersect. But you don't really necessarily realize how they all fit together until later on. But they do eventually all fit together. And it's just, it was beautiful. I really, really enjoyed it. It's not a really fast-paced book, but I don't mind that. I don't mind if a book is slow as long as it's beautifully slow. And this one was beautifully slow. So you get to see what life was like. You get to experience this with them. And not all of it's fast-paced, but some of it is. There are, you know, issues. There's survival issues. One of the things that was talked about was how electricity was a novelty to these people back then. These people in the future. All right, so camera issue number 1 is that apparently it only records for 20 minutes straight, and if you're talking to somebody else or doing something else and leave it recording for a minute, well, it doesn't tell you that 20 minutes is your it time. So when I got cut off, I was talking about Station 11, and that electricity was a novelty to the people in the future, and that there has been a lot of, you know, people talking about. One of my friends read it with me. There's a couple of my friends read it with me, but one of my friends read it prior to when I did, and she said her biggest problem was how come the people in the future didn't pick up with electricity. And I found a review that said the reason why they think that people didn't have electricity was not because they couldn't, but because they were trying to work out their hierarchy of needs. And the first thing they needed to do was survive, and then they could thrive. And so this is about going from so many people, so much illness, to nobody, everybody fighting to survive, and then slowly starting to make it so they can thrive, which is the whole point of the traveling theater group, was they wanted to thrive. So amazing book. I don't know if this part of it's going to be disjointed or not with the fact that my camera cut off, but hopefully I can weave it together seamlessly. Hi guys, so me from the future, a few days, and I'm still in my pajamas, and I was sitting down editing, and I was thinking, okay, this is going pretty well. And then when I was going through and getting to my best, right where the camera cut off, I realized that when I turned it back on to re-record, not only did I get blurry camera shots, so I'm so sorry about that. I had my daughter check to make sure that I was in frame, but apparently she didn't notice that it was blurry. And I thought it was clear when I was looking into it earlier, but again, didn't notice that it was blurry when I was sitting there. So I apologize profusely for that. But I also forgot to add in one of my books. So when we cut off, I was on my 3rd favorite, and then I went directly to my 1st. I totally re-skipped my 2nd because I was flustered that it had cut off on me without letting me know, and now I'm here to add in my 2nd favorite book of the year. Oh my gosh, this video has been one gigantic mess, and I'm so sorry. So the book is The Daughter of Smoke and Bones, and it's not just the book, it's the entire trilogy. It so far is everything that I have read from Laini Taylor. I've absolutely loved her work. It is amazing, and I plan on reading everything she writes. So I have not read Trains of Dreamer yet, but I did read all 3 of these, as well as the little novella that she has for it, and absolutely loved the series. It started off a little bit slow because Carew was spending time torturing her ex-boyfriend, and I couldn't figure out what the point was. But as soon as the actual story started, it just flew, and I absolutely loved it. There was so much action, so much adventure, a little bit of romance, and a lot of killing and fighting and fun fantasy world stuff, and made me really, really want to go visit Prague when I am out gallivanting around Europe. I want to go see Prague now because of this book. They make it sound absolutely stunning. So yeah, I wanted to add this in really quick, just to let you guys know that I can count. I just can't remember garbage when I get flustered, and when I get flustered because my camera shuts off on me, wonderful things occur like blurriness and forgetting books. So now we'll take you back to the slightly blurry #1 pick, and hope you guys don't hate it too much. Talk to you later. Bye. I wanted to do an honorable mention, which was that I am rereading Harry Potter right now. I did reread most of Harry Potter in 2017. I'm just finishing the last couple books now. But I wanted to mention this because this is not in my, Harry Potter will not be in my top 17 because it is a reread. But it still holds that #1 space in my heart. It'll always be my favorite. It's just not mentioned here because I read it before. So my #1 is The Nightingale, and The Nightingale is a historical fiction based on World War II, and most of the books that I've seen that are historical fiction are based on the parts of the war, the soldiers on our side, the concentration camps, but not a lot of it is about the occupied countries. This book is about the women of occupied France, how they fought against the Nazis, how they endured and survived the Nazi occupation, about the women who had to take German soldiers into their homes and feed them and possibly be abused by them, about the women who were trying to help the Allies for us. So like the Americans who crashed in France, or the English who did the same. These were women who were putting their lives on the line to get our soldiers out so that the Germans didn't kill them. And it was a really, really powerful book. I read it, I was just overcome by this amazing, amazing story. The author put so much time and energy into making sure that the book was as true to history as possible. She said it took her a lot more research than any other book that she's written because of the fact that she put so much into it. One of my close friends read it right after I did. When I told her it was an amazing book, she went out and read it. She said it's one of her favorites now, and she'll read it over and over again. And this book had kind of been plaguing me. I kept seeing it everywhere. People on BookTube would talk about it, but I never really paid attention to what it was about. I would see it on Book Outlet in the top picked books that were on there, and I kept seeing it and I kept wanting to be curious about it. Didn't know what it was about, didn't know if I was going to like it. I walked by it one day at the library and just picked it up and said, okay, I'm going to read this. And I had about an hour to wait outside for my daughter to get out of school because I got there early, and it was sitting next to me in the car. I picked it up. It took me 2 days. It was an amazing book, and I highly, highly recommend it. Be warned that there is some very difficult to read parts, but overall, it was the most amazing book I've read in a long time. So that's it. That is my best and worst of 2017. I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to know what yours are, so please leave me some comments about what you thought of my choices, what your choices would have been, and I will talk to you guys in the comments and see you in another video soon. Bye!